Thank you, and welcome everyone to today's webinar titled 4 Life Hacks to Love Your Security Job from Elements of Security Operations. Today's webinar will be recorded and available after the session is over. All lines will be muted throughout today's presentation, so if you have a question, please submit it through the question box on our presenters, and one of our presenters will answer as many questions as time allows at the end of the webinar. Today's presenters are Carrie Marte, author of Elements of Security Operations, and Casey Cross, Senior Product Marketing Manager of Palo Alto Networks. Casey, I will turn it over to you to kick us off.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. We are going to discuss 4 life hacks that can help you love your security job. I am Casey Cross, and I work in product marketing at Palo Alto Networks. And I'm here today with Carrie Matre, co-author of the book, Elements of Security Operations. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you, Casey.
You have a long background in security operations. Why did you get involved in SecOps?
Well, I actually started out as a programmer. And as a programmer, I got into ethical hacking because the idea was if I knew how to create a program, I would know how to break a program. And from there, I got into data warehousing of security data. And that's how I got involved in security operations, because I really got to dig into the data that analysts need and really understand what's going to help them do their job.
So you came over to security from the programming side, not the networking side, like most people do. Mm-hmm. So over the years, how have you seen security and security operations evolve?
Well, there's been a ton of technology changes. I mean, when I first started, it would take 24 hours to run a daily report, which is not very effective. And today we can get that sort of data, at the snap of our fingers. The technology has changed. The attackers have advanced. One thing that really hasn't changed is people. And we still struggle with overwhelming our analysts, trying to keep them, engaged with their job and really effective, and really avoid that burnout that we see so often in analysts.
And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to talk about little things that can be done to make analysts' lives better, to make them enjoy their jobs and avoid that ultimate burnout.
Great. Yeah, I know a lot of people are very interested in this topic. So how did the book Elements of Security Operations come about? Well,
John Caimano, who is my co-author on the book, we've both been in about 150 different SOCs throughout the world. We've seen what works and what doesn't, and ultimately, what security operations can do to provide confidence to the business that they're protecting the assets. So we've taken this knowledge of what we've seen, and we broke it down into 72 different elements of what we think a successful SOC needs.
And that became the basis of your book, Elements of Security Operations. So by looking at all the different 72 elements and figuring out what are the potential problems that can arise from those elements or different combinations of those elements, you can start seeing potential strategies to make you enjoy your job more. And so that brings us to the crux of this presentation, 4 life hacks to love your security job. So with that, let's dive in.
All right. So as we jump into these life hacks, one of the things I want to bring up is when I talk about security operations, I'm not just talking about these large organizations that have these big rooms and a ton of big monitors on the wall. Some organizations I've worked with have a person that looks at security logs once a day. That counts as security operations. And so I want to make sure that you understand that all of these life hacks that I'm giving you, all of the security, the elements of security operations apply to any size organization. Now, the elements of security operations, as I said, were 72 elements that we came up with to make a successful SOC. What you'll notice when you dig into these elements is that a lot of these things are not within a SOC. The point is that the success of security operations goes beyond just what happens within a SOC. It's beyond just the technology. It's beyond just the processes that we use. So the Elements of Security Operations really contains everything that's needed to make your SecOps successful. And what you'll see front and center of this chart is people. People make or break our SOC, and that's what we really want to focus on today, is to figure out how to make sure that these people, if they're you, if they're people that work for you, stay happy in their jobs. So let me start with life hack number 1. figure out what it is you do here. So understand the mission of the SOC. I think this is the most important element that we have. A lot of times I talk to organizations where the SOC manager says, oh, this is what the SOC does. The SOC analysts have a different answer. The executives have a different answer. They're all kind of similar, but they're different. And what that causes is some strife within the business about expectations of what the SOC is going to provide and what the SOC actually does. So make sure that you define your mission, you document it, and you socialize it throughout the entire organization. And once that is done, then understand what your role is in achieving that mission. What is it that you are doing to contribute to the success of that mission? And then once you have that, make sure that you're measuring your impact. So we're not talking about just how many cases you closed or how many incidents you responded to, but think about the bigger picture of how many threats did you protect your business from? So really measure the impact that you're having, and that's really going to give you a sense of, this is what I do here, and that's my life hack number 1. Now, let's take a step back. What is it that a SOC does? A SOC's purpose is to identify, investigate, and mitigate threats. And the typical time allocation the analysts have is not ideal. So the typical time, most of the typical time is spent in the identify phase. And the reason is because there's false positives that you have to weed through, there's overwhelming amounts of data, and so you spend a lot of time just doing mundane tasks that really don't add to the job satisfaction. Because so much time is spent there, there's very little time spent in investigation, which is unfortunate because that's really the fun part of the job. And then mitigation is a lot of times manual, and so that takes a lot of time as well. Ideally, we would love to have machines do what they're good at, and that is repetitive tasks, that is dealing with events. And so that, ideally, we'd have identify be a very small percentage of an analyst's time. Let's let the machines do what they're good at, and let's let people do what they're good at. And what people are good at is doing these investigations. They're not investigating events, they're investigating situations. And we pay a lot of money for very smart people to work in our security operations. Let's let these smart people work on smart things. So that's ideally where we're going to. But let's break this down. So let's just take that first phase, the identify phase. We're going to look at it: alerting, initial research, severity triage, and the escalation process. Let's see where we go wrong. So first, let's just look at alerting. So alerting is just figuring out, is an event important enough to become an incident? And the problem with alerting is that we just have overwhelming event volumes. We look at it look at all the security devices that we have, they're giving us so much data, and the pitfall of that is that then our analysts are overwhelmed. There's a high rate of false positives, low fidelity data, and this is kind of a result of poorly maintained controls. So we don't have very good blocking techniques implemented. We have the technology available, but it's not always implemented properly. So that's the pitfalls of alerting. Now, one of the things analysts do is they ignore events. And I always get asked, do analysts really ignore events? Well, there was a study done in 2017 asking just that. Have you ever ignored events because you can't keep up with the overall volume of data? And the answer is yes. So 54% of these respondents said yes, they really have ignored events. 43% say no, and I think they're lying. And the reason is the very first SOC that I went into, this was a while ago, the analysts had a lot of alerts that they were looking at, and I thought, well, that's way too many alerts. How are you going to deal with them? And he did a select all of the events in the console and hit delete. And that's his way of dealing with the overwhelming events. So firsthand, I've seen this happen. They do really ignore events. This is not helping them be more effective at their job, and it's definitely not being more effective at protecting your business. So problems in alerting. Now let's continue down the path of problems. We look at initial research, and this is the high-level process of gathering that context, gathering the information to do the initial research into an possible incident. Problem with this is incomplete logging. A lot of times we have tools that are set up to provide logging for system administrators or network administrators, but they're not necessarily set up with enough logged information for security operations. So that we have incomplete logging. The other thing is the information coming in to a security operations organization comes from so many different places. So you have an analyst looking at one tool, two tools, they need some more information, they're pivoting from tool to tool to gather that context that they need. A lot of times they're doing this over and over and over again for similar incidents. And so just imagine, if you do something 50 times in a day, you're banging your head against the wall saying, why am I doing the exact same thing 50 times? So those similar incidents are not grouped, and this just kind of builds on that frustration. Okay, let's go further. The next step is severity triage, and the hardest thing about severity triage is the lack of business knowledge. And this isn't because we don't have well-trained people working in our security operations organizations. It's because we have very poor documentation of our network architecture or the assets that we have in our business. They might be 2 years old, and that's not going to help you figure out the severity of an incident because you can't figure out the impact that this incident has, how many devices it's touched and where those devices are. So that's what makes that triage hard. The other thing is if you don't have really good processes in place, you have analyst 1 with their process for severity triage, and that might be different than analyst 2, different than analyst 3. So it's really inconsistent. And one of the enemies of security operations is inconsistencies. If you can't provide confidence to the business that you can do things consistently, you're going to fail at your mission. So, inconsistent prioritization is definitely a pitfall. And then one other thing is a reliance on heroes. And we love heroes in a SOC. And these are the people that have been with the organization for years. They know all the little intricacies of the different branch offices or how networks are configured. All of this information that's not documented besides in that hero's head. The problem with this is that hero leaves. They go to a different job. Once they leave, that knowledge leaves with them. And we love that hero until they leave us, and then it's really, really hard to come back from that. So we see that a lot in severity triage, is the problem of the heroes. Now the fourth piece of this identification process is escalation. So more times than not, I have seen escalation processes happen via email. There's problems with this. Okay, that's the manual escalation. The point of the escalation is to gather support from the rest of the business, enough of the business to handle the issue that you're seeing. When it's manual, it's inconsistent. When it's manual, it can be ignored. One of the things that I've seen a lot of is, I call them black hole escalations. And this is where you raise an alert, you raise an issue, you escalate it to an IT team, and for whatever reason, they ignore it. Maybe they have other priorities, maybe your emails go conveniently to their trash bucket. That's the black hole escalations. It's super frustrating to an analyst because you've spent all of this time figuring out what this alert is, what this incident is, you find all the answers, you hand it over to be fixed, and it gets ignored. So again, we're just building that frustration of an analyst. And then once you have things maybe in a case management system, but you don't want all the details of a security incident in that case management system, so you use email for some of the data, or you use a wiki to document some of the incident, all of a sudden each incident is in 3-4 different places, so there's zero audit trail, and it's pretty much impossible for the rest of the team to learn about that incident. So these are all problems with the escalation process. Now, combine all of this, take B's and put them in a jar and shake it. And that's what you have analysts in a SOC. You know, you just get burned out. There's just too many inefficiencies, too much banging your head against the walls on some days, and that's, you know, the burnout. So what are we going to do about it? So life hack number 2, automate everything that you can. So automate those repetitive tasks. So if we go through the same process, let me just give you some ideas of where the automation can fit in. So again, with alerting, you need a prevention-based architecture, okay? Great prevention can reduce those open alerts. So block the attacks, deal with them before they even get to the SOC. If they do make it to the SOC, anything that's known, have automatic case creation. So the analyst doesn't have to do those repetitive tasks. And then ideally, you have technology in place that can identify and close those false positives automatically, so that you don't have the analysts wasting their time sifting through the false positives that are repetitive and a machine can handle. Some ideas for initial research are, you know, group similar alerts and remove those duplicates, because the analyst does not want to look at the same incident 20 times. You know, group them together, it is one malware attack, and handle it efficiently. Gather all the context that you need so that the analyst isn't pivoting from system to system, trying to get the context that they need. And then have a way that if an analyst sees a widespread attack, or they see something very, very urgent, have a way that they can fast track that. Make sure that, you know, when the analyst, these are smart people doing smart things, when the analyst says this is bad, have a way that they can escalate it quickly to be handled. Now, severity triage, remember this is where we had heroes, this is where we had poorly documented networks. I'm not going to say that we can fix the problem of poorly documented networks. Not my role here. But what we can do is we can put some automation in. So there's tools available to automatically assign that initial severity. And what happens then is it simplifies the review of the analyst, so that what they can do is look at that severity that was given by an intelligence system. They can review it per the organization. They can validate it to make sure that it actually does affect the organization. And then they can look at a list of other priorities and figure out where it can fit in context of those other events going on. And then finally, in escalation, please do not use email. As a personal favor, do not use email for escalation. Utilize playbooks. The playbooks are going to provide that consistency that you need. One thing that you do need to be aware of is you need to keep those escalation paths up to date. And it sounds like extra effort that needs to be made, but it's totally worth it. If you have a bad incident, you're going to be so happy that you spent the extra 5 minutes a month making sure that those escalation paths were up to date. And then finally, with the automatic playbooks that you're using, you can build in accountability so that you don't have those black hole escalations. So build that accountability into the process to make sure that the organizations you're working with understand the impact and the role that they have and are accountable for it in your processes. So that's life hack number 2. Automate everything that you can. Now, that was the identify phase. Now, the next phase is the investigate phase. And this is the fun part of the job. The fun part of the job is digging into those threats that we haven't necessarily seen before. We're really doing that analysis and trying to figure out what the bad guys are doing. Now, officially, we want to analyze the impact, the scope, what sort of assets were affected. Sometimes we get to figure out the objectives of the adversary if they're going after a specific resource. And then we need to figure out the impact of any containment measures, because we can't just pull the plug and turn off the network and say, oh, everything's fixed. We got to figure out the impact. Now, problems, always problems. The hardest part about this is that lack of context. Like I said, a lot of times we log information in security, or we log information in our security devices, that's meant for the engineers, that's meant for the network analysts that are making sure that the network is running, not necessarily providing the information the SOC needs. Again, analysts are rotating in between tools. In detailed analysis, this is malware analysis tools, or bad IP lists, or threat intelligence systems. And then again, they have the lack of environmental knowledge to determine what the impact actually is. So more frustrations on the analyst. So life hack number 3, simplify investigations. And that's, of course, that sounds simple. Of course we want to simplify investigations, but what are things we can actually do to simplify those investigations? Well, automatically gather context. So if you have a firewall and it is producing logging information that's really good for your IT team, but not for your SOC team, well, go in and add those extra fields that you need so that it's useful to your SOC, so that you can gather that context automatically. It's there at the analyst's fingertips. Second part of this is integrate investigation tools. And I am under no false thinking that a SOC is ever going to use one tool. A SOC is always going to use multiple tools, from maybe a SIM, maybe a threat intelligence system, maybe a malware analysis tool. Some of them are going to be commercially provided. Some of them are going to be open source. That's okay, but they need to be integrated together. And I'm not talking big, elaborate programs through APIs to pull this together. Sometimes it's just a right-click capability. Say, right-click, pull up the analysis of this event and tell me what this attack means. So simple integration of those investigation tools so that the analyst doesn't have to pull up separate windows separately. And then an important piece is establishing feedback to the content engineers. So once a detailed analysis has been done, we want to make sure that the lessons learned are fed back to the content engineers, because sometimes it's going to be an actual attack that we want to create controls for so that it's prevented in the future. And sometimes even after detailed analysis, we're going to figure out that this was actually a false positive and we need to tweak the controls. So that feedback to the content engineers is going to be essential to really helping you be more satisfied with your job, because what you're doing is not just going into a black hole. Now, all of this can be done manually, or we have ways that you can actually automate this process with Palo Alto Networks Cortex. So I'm going to pass it back to Casey to kind of walk us through what's available for that.
Thanks, Carrie. The good news is that technologies exist to help you automate each step in the process. So let's dive in and discuss how you can simplify your security operations and make your job more enjoyable with Cortex from Palo Alto Networks. You can think of Cortex, a family of integrated products from Palo Alto Networks, as a platform for security operations. It's your one-stop shop for SecOps, solving your key challenges in a more efficient way and with better security outcomes. The platform has 2 primary elements: Cortex XDR for prevention, detection, investigation, and response, and Cortex SOAR. Cortex XDR was a first-to-market and defining product in the XDR market category, and it leapfrogs endpoint detection and response and other types of behavioral analytics tools which offer only a narrow focus on just the endpoint or user or network data. So it delivers features like endpoint protection, machine learning powered threat detection, as well as investigation and response. Cortex SOAR, on the other hand, allows organizations to integrate with over 300 different tools and use case management and orchestration and real-time collaboration to improve their security operations. Our customers love Cortex SOAR. Note that we have rebranded our Demisto product to Cortex SOAR to align to our overall vision of making Cortex the center of your security operations. So let's take a deeper look at Cortex XDR. Its unique combination of capabilities provides you everything you need to secure your organization. First, we prevent everything that is possible to be prevented with our industry-leading network, endpoint, and cloud security products. Cortex XDR includes the Cortex XDR agent, and that agent blocks attacks while also collecting data for detection. It stops malware, exploits, and fileless attacks with multiple security engines that work together for best-in-class prevention. We also can detect stealthy attacks with our behavioral analytics and machine learning. And you can use customizable rules to detect certain combinations of attributes and activities. Your security team can create their own rules to detect threats specific to their environment. And it also accelerates threat hunting with powerful searching capabilities. Because Cortex XDR stitches together network, endpoint, and cloud data, it can determine the root cause of attacks to help speed up investigations. For example, it not only determines which endpoint executable was responsible for a network attack, it can figure out which application launched that executable. So Cortex XDR helps your analysts understand the root cause of an attack, and it produces a timeline of the events leading to that threat and provides integrated threat intelligence. That means that your security team members know exactly what that threat is and what action to take. Finally, analysts can respond to threats and adapt their defenses. Tight integration with enforcement points allows analysts to quickly eliminate threats. Analysts can also more quickly detect similar attacks in the future by applying the knowledge they gained to build new custom rules. And as a cloud-native application, our own researchers can analyze anonymized metrics and data to hone our own detection algorithms. This can improve our prevention capabilities on the endpoint and our detection capabilities in the cloud. Let's take a look at how Cortex XDR improves investigation and response. In order to catch sophisticated attacks, many large organizations have deployed multiple detection and response tools. These tools, like User and Entity Behavioral Analytics, or UABA, and Endpoint Detection and Response, or EDR, typically look at one type of data, such as network data or endpoint data. All of these tools provide lots of information for investigations, but they also generate lots of alerts, and they often overwhelm security teams. They don't provide the context that is needed for an investigation or response. As a result, your analysts must navigate a labyrinth of disconnected security tools in order to investigate alerts. For example, if an analyst is reviewing a network security alert, that analyst must try to figure out which user is associated with it and swivel to their endpoint detection and response console to review which processes are running and see if any of them are malicious, and maybe look at their network traffic analysis tool to figure out what was happening on the network. And that requires specialized skills and lots of time to get a full picture of each attack. With Cortex XDR, we help accelerate and simplify investigations. Cortex XDR doesn't just provide a process tree and make analysts figure out the root cause of what happened. We make threat analysis simple, to the point where even the most junior analysts can figure out what happened, and fast. Cortex XDR groups together related alerts into incidents, providing a complete picture of an attack. Analysts can investigate any alert with one click. We also use patented technology to identify exactly what happened and which process was the root cause of the attack. Analysts can click on each process in the root cause analysis view to understand which CLI commands were run by the process and to view other details like whether the file is malware and what directory or path the file is located in. You can also review threat intelligence and a forensics timeline. We also stitch the data together, the network and the security data, to the endpoint data to simplify investigations. So an analyst can just right-click on a network firewall alert to find out which endpoint process was responsible for the alert. As a result, we can help your analysts investigate threats 8 times faster. And one of the organizations that takes advantage of all of these automation capabilities is our own Security Operations Center. Isn't that right, Carrie?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see what our own SOC can do with such limited resources, because they embrace all of these automation techniques. Now, our SOC is kind of interesting in the way that it works. They do a 30-30-30 way of distributing their time. So 30% of their time, their analysts are spending responding to alerts, kind of the reactive part of their day. 30% of their time is spent on proactive things such as threat hunting. Maybe there's a new threat out in the wild, or maybe we see something weird in our network and they're able to take the time to investigate that. And 30% of the time, which I think is the most important, they spend on continuous improvement. And this is where they go through alerts that rules that they have that are not firing at all to try to figure out if they're written improperly or maybe not even needed, or if there's alerts that are firing too much and becoming too noisy. They spend time figuring out why and then providing that information back to those that are running our security controls to continuously make sure that their SOC is running as efficiently as possible.
It's amazing what they're able to do with such limited resources. So we promised the audience 4 life hacks. Do you have a 4th life hack for the audience,
Yes.
Carrie?
Yeah, I think this is going to, it's the most important for security analysts to like their job, and that's continuous learning. You can't get stuck in a rut, so what you want to do is find different things to learn. One of the easiest things to do is take the tools that you have in your SOC, because we all have a lot of them, and find an additional feature that you don't already use. Learn the new features, the new capabilities of the tools you already have. This is free. You don't need to spend, I'm not saying you need to go and spend a bunch of money on week-long training, but look around your SOC and try to figure out what you can do next. Maybe it's learning Python or Perl or digging into malware analysis, or even take a business class. A lot of times we get so focused on security that we forget about the business that we're actually serving. So by taking a business class, you can understand the marketing functions, the sales functions, the communications functions, and that's really going to help you be able to do your job. So continuous learning is going to help analysts really embrace what they do for their organizations.
And there's lots of opportunities to learn. For example, analysts could read your book, right?
That's right. They can learn all about what can make a successful security operations organization.
There are so many opportunities for learning. In fact, everyone in the audience can download the book right now at the link go.paloaltonetworks.com/elements. But before they do, they have to stay tuned because we're about ready to jump into our Q&A session. So if you have any questions, make sure you submit your questions now.
So it looks like we have received quite a few questions from the audience. And the most common question is, will we get the slides after the presentation? And the answer to that is yes, we will distribute the slides after the presentation. The next question is, does the Elements book tell me how to use Palo Alto Networks technology to automate elements of my SOC? I'll hand that over to you, Carrie, to help answer.
Yeah, so the Elements of Security Operations book is product agnostic. So it's not going to talk about Palo Alto Networks products specifically. It's going to talk about what elements are needed for a successful SOC. It's going to talk about, approaches for automation for protection and detection and response. But if you'd like information about Palo Alto Network products, then we do offer product demos, or we have security operations workshops that can really dive into those elements and help you plan, an attack for improving your SOC specifically. So reach out to us if you're interested, but the book itself is product agnostic.
Okay, the next question also looks like it's for you, Carrie. How does career progression play into job satisfaction?
Oh, that's a good one. So secret number 1 that I have for people is that not everyone wants to be a manager. So, employees want to grow, but it's not always in a job title that moves into management, et cetera. Sometimes it's, progression that's a technical career path or a business managerial career path. So you need to make sure that you have both of those available so that your staff can see the future with your company, or else they're going to, think about leaving. And another thing that works for our SOC is that we end up pairing new analysts with experienced analysts. And what we found is they really can feed off of each other, because the experienced analyst can bring that knowledge, that experience to the newer analysts. But the newer analysts have a fresh set of eyes that they're looking at problems with. So this setup, we found, really makes it feel like a team and increases that job satisfaction.
Okay, the next question I'll take, and it's about how is Cortex XDR deployed? So Cortex XDR is a cloud-native application, and it collects data from our Palo Alto Networks firewalls, the Cortex XDR agent, which provides full endpoint protection as well as data collection, Prisma Access, and our VM series firewalls, as well as third-party products such as Checkpoint firewalls, Fortinet firewalls, and Cisco ASA firewalls, and basically any network-based security alert, if it has the right information, such as source IP address and destination IP address. We can also collect Windows event logs. And all of that data is then sent to the cloud, and then we analyze it for detection and provide information for investigation and for response. So then I think that answers that question. So moving on, the next question is, I am the only security person in my company. How do I make sure the company understands my mission? I'll hand that over to you, Carrie.
Sure. That's a very common position is that people find themselves in as the only person handling security, and it's really hard because other people don't necessarily know what you do. So my advice would be to write it down. You make it very, very concise about what service really you are offering to your business. A lot of times businesses, there's some disappointment with security operations, or just not satisfaction with the services because they don't really understand what to expect from their security operations team. So as the security person, it's your job to tell them. So write it down, review it with your leadership, whoever your management is, and then have them take it in front of the other business leaders to make sure that the expectations are set properly so that you understand your mission, they understand your mission, and you're able to achieve that, and there's not that disappointment in the organization.
Okay, it looks like the last question for the day is, how do I know that if I provide my team training opportunities that they won't take that knowledge and leave for another company?
The simple answer is you don't. Your team members are always growing. Attrition is a thing, but would you rather have untrained staff or knowledgeable staff that you've provided these training opportunities to that can really focus on helping your business? So, you can't stop people from leaving, but my suggestion would be, create a team of diverse skills. Provide them with the right tools or automation to take care of the mundane tasks so that they can really focus on fun things, focus on those detailed investigations if that's what they like. The job satisfaction is really going to come from working on those fun things and really working around smart people. So I wouldn't let the fear of your staff leaving stop you from providing these opportunities to your analysts.
Okay, I lied. I said that we had all the questions, and we had two late entrants. So I wanted to pose those, I guess, to Carrie and I. So we have a question is there a Cortex agent that is deployed on each instance in a cloud infrastructure? So yes, you can deploy the Cortex XDR agent. It supports Linux, Windows, Mac OS, and other operating systems. So basically, if you have a cloud infrastructure with Linux, you could deploy the agent on each instance and collect data from there. Or if you have our VM series firewalls deployed, monitoring network traffic between instances and users, then you could monitor that traffic and then collect it as network traffic. And then the next question is, have you ever heard of a specific network security, I'm not going to name them, vendor that's a competitor? I should have read this before I read it out loud, but anyways, and the answer is, I'll just say that in general, we won't talk about competition here or why Cortex XDR is better, but we would just recommend that when customers are looking at detection and response, that they consider a holistic approach that would be able to incorporate all of your data, including your network and your cloud and your endpoint data, to help simplify operations. And then there's a question, where can we purchase?
let me add to that other one too. So the general question is about, adding products to your SOC. Do you use them? How do you know when to use them? So my advice for that would be almost all products have a trial. They have a demo. So try them out. I mean, not all open source products are going to work for you, or not all certain type products are going to work. So, engage in a demo. Go try something out and see how it's going to work for you. So.
And then the next question is, two more. Can we purchase your book, Carrie?
So the book is actually free. So we'll get you the link, but it's go.paloaltonetworks.com/elements. So you can download it for free, but if you'd like to send me some extra cash on the side, I will take it. Just kidding. Go download it.
And then, yes. And then does Cortex have an automation framework? I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I think that we do have several products that help with automation, including Cortex XDR as well as Cortex XOR, and those products will help you implement automation into all elements of your security operations.
Okay.
I think that is all. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you found this information useful.